Good evening, Elife leaders. Do you know these two men? Have you seen them before? I think the pin of the guy in front gives him away. Okay, do you know these guys? No? If you're not in tune sa news, so this is Benjamin Netanyahu, or Benjamin, the Prime Minister of Israel. And the one on his right side is Yoav Gallant, okay, Minister of Defense. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning them is because we're getting ourselves familiar with Israeli names. And later on, we'll encounter a guy named Yoav. And this is the spelling that they're using there. Okay? Yoav is a nephew of David. And he became the chief minister, defense minister, commander of David when he became a king. This evening, we will be talking about the start of the reign of King David. The title of our message for today is Start Right in Serving the Lord. So it was very important for David to start doing things right as he takes the reign in the kingdom of Israel. But you will notice from the story that it was not a smooth transition from the rule of Shaul to himself. It's because it will take him some time actually to rule over the whole kingdom of Israel. And you may think that it was disappointing because there's no other person that should be reigning, only him that was anointed by the prophet Samuel. But in this story, we'll find out that there was one other surviving son of Shaul, and he became temporarily the king of Israel in the northern part. Okay? So this evening, I'd like to share you 5 points, 5 lessons that we can learn from the story. 2 Samuel chapter 2. First is start right in your new service. Okay, we will try to relate this to whatever service that the Lord brings us. But of course, the service that we're talking about here first is David ruling as king of Israel. David had to wait patiently for the Lord to give him the opportunity to rule as king of Israel. So when King Shaul died, the people hailed David as the new king. So it was just natural for the people to acknowledge him as the new king. This is what I'm trying to drive at this section, section A. Run to fulfill your mission from the Lord. That's what David has been doing, even though he wasn't a king yet at that time. The promises of the Lord will run toward you. Years before he became king, he was already anointed. He was just waiting for his turn. And when his turn came, it was the perfect timing of the Lord for him to rule. But then again, the promises of God came to him rather than him pursuing the promises of God. Let's read the first part of the story. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Yehuda or Judah?" He asked, the Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron." The Lord answered. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Israel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Now, if you remember, Hebron is the inheritance of Caleb. And Caleb was one of the spies, actually the spy that represented Yehuda when Moshe sent spies to look at the promised land. So this is very important. Remember, he was in Ziklag. And the capital of the kingdom where the royal family lived was Gibeah, and it's within Benjamin. Now, you may wonder, why did David not go to Jerusalem or Jerusalem? You will notice that God gave him that city a few years after he reigned, not immediately. The Lord wanted him to start at Hebron. Now, it's not the main city in the kingdom. It's way too south. If you're going to rule the whole country, it's better for you to stay at the middle part of the country. But the middle part of the country is controlled by the Philistines, not only the western side. Jezreel, where they had the battle where Israel and the Philistines met and they lost, and the Philistines chased them to Mount Gilboa. The Philistines were controlling that part of the land. So at this time, it was just right for him to rule from Hebron, not from the mountains in Jerusalem. We'll explain that soon when we get to that part of the story. And so from Ziklag, they traveled to Hebron, and he had his royal family set up there David sought the guidance of the Lord where to settle. That's very important. Now, since he will be ruling first his own tribe, Yehuda, it wasn't easy for him to take control of the other tribes of Israel. God wanted him to settle there first. That's the purpose of that. And David had to be patient. Even though he was more famous than Shaul, he was more victorious than him, but it wasn't easy to bring the loyalty of the people to him because of the forces of the house of Shaul. And that's what we will be learning for tonight. Verse 4, the men of Yehuda came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Yehuda. You will notice that it's only the people of Yehuda that came to David, to Hebron. And they're the ones who anointed him as king. He's been anointed already by Samuel. Okay? But at this time, since there was no more king, the king has died, the people initiated to install him as king. David didn't have to set himself up as the new king. It's the people that set him there. And that's good. That's good. When David was told that it was the men of Yavesh Gilad who had buried Shaul, we'll look at the map later on where this place is, he sent messengers to say to them, as he tries to win the people of the north, because he's from the south. Do you think there's something similar with this setup, with what happened to the Philippines? This is just a segue. Our former president is from the south. And so he keeps on going back to the south. And when he finished his term, he still wanted to win the people of the north. So the next ruler was coming from the south, which is our current president. In order to keep the alliance with the south, he had Sara Duterte. So they can control both the north and the south. That's a political move, right? So imagine David didn't have that kind of somebody from the north who will help him out, win the people there. He himself had to win the people of the north. Especially that David battled more the Philistines, which was just in their western side. He didn't have to battle all other enemies of Israel from the northern side. So David wasn't that popular in the north. So let's read verse 5. The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Shaul your master by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness. And I too will show you this same favor because you have done this. Now then be strong and be brave. For Shaul your master is dead, and the people of Yehuda have anointed me king over them. So David was introducing himself to the people in the north. Now, where is Javesh Gilad? Do you see the map here? Okay. In the middle is Jordan River. Okay. You can see there's Sea of Galilee. You can see Yezreel near Issachar. Jabesh Gilad is on the opposite side of Jordan River. So the people of Yavesh Gilad crossed Jordan River. They went to Mount Gilboa and retrieved the bodies of Shaul and his sons and gave them an honorable burial. They were on the eastern tribe of Manasseh. Okay? Shaul died on the western side of Manasseh. So, what David was doing is acknowledging the kindness of these people. The ones who gave Shaul an honorable burial. Not even the people from West Manasseh did that. It had to be the people from East Manasseh. So he commended them for doing that. What David was showing here is that as he honored Shaul, he also honored the people who honored Shaul. David commended the northeastern people who buried Shaul and his sons. So he's showing them that I'm not your enemy. I supported Shaul. I didn't rebel Shaul. You have done a good job in burying our king. Now I'm the new king. Now I want you to be strong. I'm not your enemy. Even though you're hurting at the death of our king, as he was hurting too. Remember in our last lesson, he led the whole kingdom for a lament and he gave them a song to sing in order to memorialize the memory of Shaul. So that was one of his moves in order to win the hearts of the people from the north. So that's why, that's our letter A, start right in your new service. He wasn't trying to impose himself on the northern people. In the south, he already had won their hearts. The people anointed him, but it was a struggle from the people in the central part and also from the north. So that's our first lesson. The next lesson is start in places where you can. So we'll be reading from verses 8 to 11. The Lord led David to rule from Hebron first, as it was not easy yet to convince the northern tribes of Israel to follow his lead. You will notice in this part of the story that David wasn't the only one who reigned in the kingdom of Israel. So you remember when David spared Shaul for the second time, he challenged Avner, the commander or the chief of the military of Israel, for failing to support Shaul. Shaul almost got killed, of course by him, but he didn't do that. So I think Avner felt so shamed because of what happened. And of course, they lost to the Philistines. And the king was killed because of the Philistines. So what would Avner do? He'd try to redeem himself. And he's not from Yehuda. He's from Benjamin too. So he'll try to set up a king coming from Benjamin. Verse 8. Meanwhile, Avner, son of Ner, the commander of Shaul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, and brought him over Mahanaim. So Mahanaim is also in the eastern side of Jordan, also in East Manasseh. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuris. Ashuris is in the northern part of Israel, and Yezreel, this is the central part, where the Philistines would sometimes take control and they would fight over it. And also Ephraim, which is just near Benjamin. And Yehuda, of course, Benjamin, their own tribe, and all Israel. You notice here the author said all Israel, all the other tribes. What you will notice here is that David would not resist or fight Avner and Ishbosheth, the son of Shaul, for setting him up as the new king. When he was supposed to be the new king, and when his fellow Yehudis already installed him as the new king, he did not insist on taking control of Gibeah, the town of Shaul, or take control of the other territories. He did not fight with Ishbosheth, with Avner, to take control of the whole land. He allowed God to place him in position, but to have actually control of the whole nation, he will also allow God to give him that control. He wasn't insisting on it. The Lord did not give David yet the northern parts of Israel to rule, as they were still loyal to the house of Shaul. So how will David deal with this? There is another king set up by Avner. And remember, Avner didn't have the authority to set up anybody as king. He's trying to be a kingmaker. So again, let's look at the map. This is the same map that I showed you a while ago. Can you see Ephraim? Eventually, Dan would be displaced. So Dan is in between Ephraim and Yehuda. Simeon was mixed with Yehuda. Reuben was on the other side. Benjamin is small, but within it is Gibeah, the capital. So you can see it was easier for Benjamin to take control of the northern parts because he's blocking the way for the Yehudis to influence the people of the north. And most of the activities were happening in West Manasseh, in Ephraim and Benjamin. If you will read the book of Judges, so many of the stories of the judges occurred in Gad, in West Manasseh, sometimes in Issachar, most of the times in Ephraim, in Dan, in Benjamin, and of course in Yehuda. Not so much of Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, not much stories happening there. Now, what happened during the United Kingdom? Of course, the 12 tribes remain in control with their own territories. But if you will look at the alliances, okay, you see what happened. The purple in the center is Ishbosheth's territory. Can you see Mahanaim there? It's on the other side of Jordan River. Just above it, also on the other side of the river, is Yabesh Gilad. Okay? And you can see Gilgal, you can see Jerusalem, and Gibeon. Later on, we will have to deal with Gibeon. And you can see the capital of the southern, the territory of David in Hebron. Let's have a closer look at Ishbosheth's territory. So you see there the purple, the eastern part of the Sea of Galilee. You can see clearer, nearer, Yabesh, Gilad, Mahanaim. Ishbosheth has more land to control. In David's territory, now this is blown up compared to the previous slide, the territory of Judah is smaller than the territory of Ishbosheth. So will David feel insecure that not all people were following him? Let's see what would happen. Okay, let's continue with the story. Verse 10, Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel. And he reigned only 2 years. Only 2 years. Soon, in other lessons, we will learn why only a couple of years. The author is summarizing the story already. He only would reign for a couple of years, so don't worry about this guy. The tribe of Yehuda, however, remained loyal to David. Of course, David was from Yehuda. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Yehuda was 7 years and 6 months. He reigned from that place. Eventually, when Ishbosheth was deposed, he would move back near Gibeah, about 8 kilometers south of Gibeah, which would be Jerusalem or Yerushalayim. Since Yerushalayim is by the border of Yehuda and by the border of Benjamin, now he can have more influence on the northern territories. Okay? Second lesson that we learn here is that David focused on the south and faithfully served his people for those 7.5 years that he ruled in his own tribe. He did not campaign to gain the north because that would start a fight against Ishbosheth if he tried to influence the northern peoples. Now, what is going on here? This will be a precursor of the future division of the kingdom of Israel. That means, from the time that Shaul and David were fighting, well, David didn't really want to fight his own king, but that would start sort of a division within the whole kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Israel would be united during the time of Shaul, during the time of David, and during the time of Solomon. After Shlomo or Solomon, that would be a divided kingdom. So there is already a preview that there has been a rift between the northern territories and the southern people. Right? Third lesson, do not start playing a dangerous game. So this is where the story takes a turn. There's a twist in here. David allowed his nephews to play a pride-filled contest that ended up deadly. This intensified and worsened the Cold War between the north and the south people of Israel. Come to think of it, this was unnecessary. So let's look at the story, what happened in this part of the chapter. Verse 12. Avner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Okay, let's look at the map again. Gibeon is Gibeon. You can see Gibeon, right? You can see Mahanaim. Mahanaim is on the eastern side, on the opposite side of Jordan. So they traveled from Mahanaim to the southern western part of their kingdom, Gibeon or Gibeon. Okay? So it was just at the border with Yehuda. Okay? So let's go back to verse 12. So why did they go there? Okay? Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. Pause for a moment. Who's Zeruiah? This is the half-sister of David. So Joab is the nephew of David. One group sat on one side of the pool and one group on the other side. So they were in the territory of Benjamin. Then Avner said to Joab, Joab again is a Yehudi, let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us. All right, let them do it, Joab said. So the reason why they met there, they were separated on one side over the other. They came there for a contest. They came there for an entertainment. Now, was this with good intentions? We'll find out if eventually they just came there to have some fun. I believe this was more of a contest to test the strength of the other kingdom. Because if one kingdom sees that we're better than the other, it could be an opportunity for them to take over the other kingdom. So it was only a test for them to see how good the other group is. So they're in a contest, like an Olympics. There is a motive that we will find out later. But remember, they are in the territory of Ishbosheth, Benjamin. Okay? So Joab agreed because perhaps that's the reason why they went there. I don't think this was a bait from Avner. They came there prepared to go for a contest. Maybe this is the contest that they have been waiting for so long. Maybe they have set up before this. It didn't push through until the time that they were both ready. Okay, we'll meet in our territory just by the border and we'll see our men who are the better ones in fighting. So what you will notice here is that David did not go to watch the contest, but Ishbosheth did. Now, that's interesting why David didn't show up. Maybe he didn't approve of it. But because of the pride of Ishbosheth and Avner and Yoav, they went there to see how good their men were in fighting each other. So what happened? So they stood up and were counted off 12 men from Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, and 12 from David. So if this was from Benjamin, it's not even from other tribes controlled by Ishbosheth from the north. So it would appear that this is the small tribe of Benjamin versus the large tribe of Yehudah. I think they were bringing in the contest the best of their young men to a fierce test to see the strength of their future. Verse 16, then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazurim. Okay. Can you imagine the setup of this contest? 12 pairs. So you choose who you will fight. You cannot fight two people. You just have to face one, mano a mano. But then this battle was not just an arm wrestling or Greco-Roman wrestling. It wasn't like that. There was no Greco-Roman wrestling during this time. This was way ahead during the times of the Romans and of the Greeks. Anyway, so it was wrestling with a dagger. So imagine you would have to hold on to the other and try to avoid being hit by the dagger. So this is a bloody contest. And you have to be fair because this is just a contest. But you can imagine the setup of this contest was very physical. So when you have men fighting it out, especially their pride, when they're representing their tribes, that this could turn bad. What else can you imagine in this kind of setup? When you have a dagger, things can go rough. That's a question. Does that mean that David did not approve of this? He just allowed his men to go there. We will never know. But it's interesting that the author said David wasn't there. So what do you expect from this match of fierce warriors? It's not going to be a surprise if this turns violent and deadly. That's what exactly happened in verse 23. Now, look at how they named the place. Helkath Hazurim. We actually don't know what this word means. Several English translations translated it in different way. Some would translate it as field of adversaries. Some would translate it as field of enemies. The New American Bible would translate it as field of sides because they have two sides. The New King James would translate it as field of sharp swords because they had dagger with them as they were fighting. The New Living Translation used field of swords. The CEV field of daggers. But other translation like the ESV, NIV, NET, they avoided translating it to English because they were just not sure what it meant. They said it also in Hebrew. Okay? So check out those translations. Just like what I have here, it's also in Hebrew because the translators were not sure what it actually meant. Verse 17, the battle that day was very fierce, and Avner and the Israelis were defeated by David's men. The visitors won over the home people. And it was shameful for them because they should have had the advantage. And it appears to be that they didn't prepare well. Diba? The battle ended with all the 24 participants hurting each other because they have daggers. And they said that they fell down. So maybe, I think when somebody is injured enough, the contest had to stop between the pair until all the pairs, are at least one of them, are down. The Yehudis won over the Israelis. Look at how the author described them, Avner and the Israelis, because they're the majority. He didn't call the people of the south as Israelis. He called them David's men. Okay. The result of the match determines the winner. No referees were assigned to regulate the fight. What a contest. Okay. The three sons of Zeruiah were there. Yoav. So I showed you Yoav Gallant earlier. Avishai and Asael. Now, Asael was as fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He's a very swift guy. He chased Avner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued him. Avner looked behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asael?" "It is," answered. So you can imagine Asael also wanted to take part of the contest, but he wanted to fight someone else, not one of those young men of Benjamin. He wanted to fight the commander. Why was that so? Maybe they came there not just for the contest, but actually to shame Avner and maybe to kill Avner because they had the dagger. He was swift. He wanted to chase Avner. But Avner quickly sensed that Asael was the one chasing him there. He was just watching there. And he was wondering, why is this man trying to chase him? We're supposed to watch this men fight over who's the better people, who has the better men. Actually, Asahel, one of the nephews of David, is listed in 2 Samuel chapter 23 verse 24 as one of David's 30 mighty men. 30. So he's one of the choicest, the best fighters, and in fact, swiftest persons within his army. So Asael used his swiftness to take Avner to a one-on-one match when Avner was off guard. He wanted to catch him when he's not aware. But Avner was quick enough to sense that someone was after him. And so he addressed him. It was good that Avner was able to sense that Asael was trying to chase him. Asael has taken this friendly match to a personal dispute. That's what we'll find out as we continue reading. Verse 21, Then Avner said to him, Turn aside to the right or to the left. Take one of the young men, not me. I'm just watching. I'm just part of the ones organizing this. The one who's supposed to fight are the young men. And I'm too old for you. And I'm too experienced for you. You're not even a match to me, young man. But Asael would not stop chasing him. Maybe because he knew he had an advantage as a young man. He has a speed. So what Avner was doing, he was redirecting Asael to one of the Israelis and challenged the Yehudi not to fight him, but instead fight the younger man. He's very match. Of course, Avner thinks that the young man was no match to him. Right? Verse 22, again Avner warned Asahel, Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? He said, I can kill you, but I don't want to, so why would I do that? Stop chasing me. How could I look at your brother Yoav in the face? So probably Yoav was older. Okay. Yoav would eventually be the commander-in-chief of David. So he's saying, my counterpart is Yoav. And if I'm gonna hurt you, how can I face your brother? Because I'm not supposed to fight you. Yeah, he'll be mad. At least Avner had some honor here. He's keeping this matter into just a contest. He doesn't want it to go beyond that. So Avner was showing patience here with Asael. And he appealed to his respect to his older brother. I respect your brother. But Asael was not being patient. He was out of control. Perhaps he was getting carried away by the victory that his men, the Yehudis, had over the men of Israel. And he wanted to sort of give the final blow by killing Avner. But Avner correctly restrained Asahel. Stop that. This is only a contest, a match between our men. We're not going beyond that. We're not matched to each other. It would be your brother, Yoav. Letter D, be careful when defending yourself. So, was what Avner did good enough to stop Asael? We'll find out. The contest between the Israelis and the Yehudis ended as Asael fell dead at the hands of Avner, who defended himself from that wild non-contestant. Again, Asael wasn't a contestant after all. Verse 23, but Asael refused to give up the pursuit. So Avner thrust the butt of his spear into Asael's stomach, and the spear came through his back. He fell there and died on the spot. And every man stopped when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. Because they thought that the contest was just up to there. They didn't expect anybody to die there by the sword. So this really turned bad. Well, Asahel couldn't be stopped. Avner was trying to restrain him. Avner had to defend himself. Now, do you think that it was justifiable for Avner to use deadly force in stopping Asahel? You see, even in our police force, okay, before you use deadly force, what you can do is first, you can disable the person. Like, shoot him on the leg, on the foot, so at least you can just immobilize him. Or sometimes don't even use the gun. You can use a baton or you can use a taser, right? In order to subdue the person being arrested. Now, I think it's hard to judge Avner for using deadly force because only he could judge the situation if he had to defend himself in that manner. No Yehudi stopped Azael. Perhaps every Yehudi knew that was part of Azael's plan to attack Avner. Now, the northern people already lost. So why will the Yehudis, the southern people, try to still kill Avner? Maybe nobody thought that Avner would use deadly force. Maybe they didn't thought that the first person to die in that event would be Asahel. The contest abruptly ended with the death of Asahel. So everybody was shocked. The nephew, one of the 30 of David, died there because of Avner. Well, he was defending himself. So how would everybody react? Both the sides of the northern people, the Israelis, and the southern people. But Joab and Avishai pursued Avner because it's their brother. They wanted to avenge for their brother. And as the sun was setting, remember they were in the territory of the people of Benjamin. They came to the hill of Ammah near Giach on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. So this is in Gibeon. Then the men of Benjamin rallied behind Avner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on top of the hill. They protected Avner. So what did Avner do? Instead of, men, let's fight, they already lost in the contest. I think Avner couldn't fight anymore, but he had to defend himself. So it was just right for him to run away because Joab and his people were stronger. Did Joab and Avishai know that Asahel was too persistent in challenging Avner? I think they did. Or was that part of their plan? You will see in the next chapters that it was really part of their plan to attack Avner. So why would they do that to Avner? Because it was Avner who set up Ishbosheth to be the king instead of David. Well, actually, at this time, these are all suspicions. But again, as we continue with the study further, we will know. Were the brothers right in pursuing Avner? Well, of course, you can say that is because their brother was killed to defend the death of their brother. Sure. Was Avner right in retreating toward the hill of Ammah? Well, of course, because he didn't want to worsen the situation, especially that they were weaker than the visiting brothers. To avoid escalating the situation. Now, it is understandable why Benjamin tried to protect Avner. They formed like a wall to protect Avner, their commander, especially that they just lost in the match. So Avner retreated to avoid worsening the situation. Verse 26, Avner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever?" He is appealing to reason. Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? Let's stop this. Let only one body fall because of this. Let's not add more bodies into this. How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israeli? Now, of course, Avner was still holding to his pride. He's the commander, right? And of course, he was far enough and he had the protection of his people from there, so he had to calm them down. Come on, Joab. Stop chasing. Cease fire. Stop making this worse. Your brother tried to kill me. Now I defended myself. You see, he called them fellow Israelis. It's like Avner was appealing to them. You're also Israelis. We're not different from you. He didn't call them Yehudis. He's appealing to them. We're brothers. We shouldn't be doing this. Of course, he's trying to survive. Now, this is a very unfortunate event because it came to this point that they had to kill each other. But of course, it didn't end that way. Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, if you have not appealed to me, if you had not reasoned out to me, the men would have continued pursuing them until this morning." So, okay, I'm stopping this. I'm taking a step back, but remember this. So, Joab finally stopped chasing Avner. He even invoked God on why he stopped pursuing him. Avner had to appeal to reason to de-escalate the situation. So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt. They no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anymore. So the trumpet was the signal of Joab for them to stop chasing Avner, especially they were in their territory. But of course, when you have that much pride, you're not afraid of anything. And maybe that could be their opportunity to take control of the northern territory. But of course, this was not mandated by God or by David. Verse 29, all that night, Avner and his men marched through Arava. They crossed the Yarden or Jordan. Yarden is Jordan. continued through the morning hours and came to Mahanaim. So Mahanaim, remember, is where they set up Ishbosheth as king. Okay? So at least the story ended this way. It didn't escalate. But was the war over? No. You'll find out in the next few chapters. So rightfully, Abner moved farther away from where they had their quarters, Mahanaim, on the other side of Jordan. So they'll be farther. So Joab would not just chase them there. Abner further distanced himself to avoid any further encounter with Joab or any immediate retaliation, especially that they were weaker. They had to regroup. Verse 30, then Joab stopped pursuing Abner and assembled the whole army. Beside Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing. So they lost about 20 people. Is that good news? But David's men had killed 360 of Benjamin who were with Abner. That's how much the northern people lost in this contest. So it was not just Asahel who died, but some of their men did. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb at Bethlehem in Judah. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. So imagine how David felt at the news at what happened. One of his nephews, one of his mighty men, 30, died. I think he was disappointed. I think this was not mandated by David. They went on their own because of their own pride. What would be the repercussions of this major incident to the future relationship of the North with the South and the South with the North? It will be terrible. It would have centuries of negative effects because of this. Though the Yehudis showed their supremacy, the story ended in a tragedy. They were brothers. They're not supposed to fight. If they were supposed to be fighting, they were supposed to defend themselves from foreigners, not from each other. Last point, letter E. Do not start a fight with your rivals. Because David was coming from Yehuda and Shaul was coming from Benjamin, it was natural, since the next king would be from another tribe, that they would end up as rivals. Remember, I've been pointing out several times in the past that David was avoiding in making his rift with his father as a tribal matter. Okay? The rivalry between the house of Shaul and the house of David seemed inevitable. David's house looked like the one who started it because of Asahel. And there was the ones who visited Gibeon. He did not have to put Shaul down to lift up himself. That's what David avoided doing. He was simply better than his father-in-law. 5 more verses. The war between the house of Shaul and the house of David lasted a long time. A long time. It didn't end up with those two guys. We wish that it would have ended with them. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Shaul grew weaker and weaker. Well, it's Shaul's fault. He was not a good leader. The conflict between the two houses eventually stretched toward the split into two kingdoms of Israel, which started at the beginning of reign of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. So Rehoboam is the son of Shlomo or Solomon. The kingdom of Israel started with the split with Yehuda in 931 BC. 931. Eventually, the northern kingdom fell into the hands of the Assyrians 722. So they only lasted more than 200 years. The kingdom was removed from the map. They fell. However, Yehuda lasted longer. They lasted 140 years more. So they started 931 BC. The Babylonians captured them and destroyed them in 586 BC. So that's 130-something years. They also fell, but they lasted longer. Let's look at this. David grew stronger and stronger. He did not weaken Shaul. He focused on improving himself as a leader, as a ruler. So when the time for him to rule over all the kingdom, including the northern territory, he would be equipped to handle the people whose loyalty was with Shaul. David focused on growing stronger rather than weakening his opponents or his opposition. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Israel. His second, Kilab, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Avshalom. So this is the same guy who temporarily dethroned David. He rebelled against his father, Avshalom. Av is father, Shalom is peace. Avshalom, son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. So Maacah is a foreigner. She's married to David. Probably she is a treaty wife. Geshur is on the Aram side. Okay? So David had treaty with them. So he married the daughter of the king of Geshur, Talmai. And so they had a son. And that son would be Avshalom. The fourth, Adoniah, or in English, Adonijah. Adoniah, the son of Chagith. Now, imagine your mother's name is Chagith. Or Maacah. Or would you prefer Abigail? The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Avital. The sixth, Yithream, the son of David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. So David expanded his family there while he was ruling in Hebron. 7.5 years. David grew his family to strengthen his house. Alright? He focused on his assignment. So that's how you start good. That's the title of our message. Start right. He didn't start a battle with Avner. It was Yoab. Right? Start right in serving the Lord. Letter A, start right in your new service. Letter B, start in places where you can. He focused on Yehuda. Letter C, do not start playing a dangerous game. That's what we saw, the dangerous contest. Be careful when defending yourself. So Avner had to defend himself from Asahel. Letter E, do not start a fight with your rivals. David focused on strengthening his own house.